Chad, it's a deja vu with NFL and the gambling policy as well. Schefter mentioned it yesterday. We knew that Isaiah Rodgers, the corner and kick returner for the Indianapolis Colts, was going to be suspended for a full year minimum. Suspended indefinitely. He can reapply at the beginning of the NFL calendar year, which is next February/March, because he's copped to it. He's admitted that he bet not just on sports while on a team facility, but on the NFL specifically. Schefter said there would be others. In fact, Rashad Berry, another member of the Colts, he's been suspended for the full year. Both Rodgers and Berry released from the Colts roster today. Meanwhile, Titans right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, former Ohio State Buckeye, he's suspended 6 games for betting on something other than the NFL, but while on team property, which could be a practice facility, could be at the stadium in the locker room, it could be a bus, it could be a hotel. It's all very gray area based on the rules and regulations of this, and the suspensions continue to follow. But Chad, I say deja vu because another example, Nicholas Petit-Frere is saying, hey, I did this. I didn't bet on the NFL. We know that because he was only suspended 6 games. But here we are again with another player saying they didn't understand the policy, didn't know the policy was in force for everything, not just the NFL.
And as we talk about this, Jordan Sims in our YouTube chat says getting suspended for gambling on other sports is insane.
Yeah, I agree.
What's also, and I agree too, totally. What also is insane is the complete incompetence of the NFLPA. Because once again, they look ill-prepared, disorganized. There's a clear lack of communication going on. We had longtime NFL vet Logan Ryan in studio not so long ago. We brought up these issues. Logan Ryan told us in a sort of passive way, yeah, I mean, I guess we knew about it. It came in some mass email that was sent out to everyone about the gambling policy. But I took note of that and thought, man, this is something very important to lose 6+ games on when you're talking about the season, the money at stake, the careers at stake.
Without pay, you're right.
To lose that many games without pay. And then to say that, yeah, I think they covered it in an email that was sent out to players. It's got to be more than that. They're doing more than that now. The NFL, NFLPA, they're doing their job at this point because a lot of people, their seasons, they're being cost their seasons because they did something they did not know was illegal. Nicholas Petit-Frere, we go from Logan Ryan in that statement to his statement today after being popped with that suspension. And his statement reads something right in the middle of it that I want to bring up that I find very, very interesting. He said, I will be including this group of players receiving a 6-game suspension. The betting I engaged in was not NFL related and was under Tennessee law. It's being sanctioned because it occurred at the Titans facility. Now, he goes on to say that he did not know the specifics. Here it is. Even after attending a league presentation, I was unaware about the specifics around placing bets from a team facility. That is unacceptable. Now, someone might come back and say, well, it's unacceptable that Nicholas Petit-Frere didn't know this because other guys didn't commit these violations, and he is guilty of committing that violation. Fine. But if he is saying, and he seems like a pretty smart guy, yes, they covered this. I attended something where they talked about it.
And he knew not to bet on the league.
But I was still unaware that this was even a thing. Absolutely knew not to bet on the league. And he's saying, I didn't bet on the league at all. This is a problem for the NFLPA. It's becoming a problem for ownership. Petit-Frere, one example, starting right tackle for a Titans team that already had a terrible offensive line, that was trying to rebuild that offensive line. And now for the first 6 games of their season, they're going to be without their starting right tackle. This is a huge blow to the Titans.
Yeah, and
it's going to be a huge blow to other teams.
And it's unpredictable.
Where this is going to continue to happen. And, oh, by the way, the NFL has just started the news dump and the announcements of a lot of other players who are going to be suspended.
Well, the NFL is announcing these as they're told about them, as things are confirmed through the apps that we're all using that are geo-tracking, and they know the location specific to, in this case, it was a team facility or a team stadium. But in other cases, it can be on a bus or at a hotel, and they know exactly where you're placing those bets, and they're turning players in because they can specify whose account it is and where they're making that bet from. But let's also go back to your point, because you're absolutely right about the NFLPA. So I'm sympathetic to players like Nicholas Petit-Frere or others who have been suspended for 6 games.
And let's
Jamison
also say
Williams.
with Petit-Frere, and you mentioned it, not doing really anything wrong.
No,
it's not like he's betting on his team,
right.
betting against the team, betting on the league.
Just
right? Like
violating
we're talking
a policy.
about a technicality that he violated that he's claiming I didn't even know about.
But here's the issue. Here's the crux of the issue, and why I say, like, DeMaurice Smith is the NFLPA director, executive director. He is stepping aside and will be replaced in 2024. At least that's the expectation. They've named his replacement. Goodell released a statement about his replacement. It was voted on through the union. All is well, at least at a surface level. That's what they want us to believe. They're always going to point to the small victories in any type of negotiation with the NFL. But the NFLPA, and also something we discussed with Logan Ryan when he was here in studio with us, by far the weakest of the four major sports across the country. Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and then there's the NFL, where it's the owners, the haves. And while the players also have, they're not getting half of what is coming in for the billionaires that own these teams. That's collectively bargained and negotiated. And here's the other issue that DeMaurice Smith and player representatives allowed to happen. It's very vague. It's tough for me to find. I was looking this up for the last couple of days. Chad, I wanted to know, did the NFLPA sign off on this policy? The answer is yes and no. But it's even worse based on what I found from Pro Football Talk and Mike Florio from something back in a couple of weeks ago, but they reference the Pro Bowl, where the Players Association and the league came to an agreement that players that were attending the Pro Bowl in Las Vegas were technically on their own dime, quote unquote. They're on their own time. Let's put it that way, which was unusual to Florio for this policy because they were allowed to go in casinos, which they're not allowed to do. Unusual because the NFL was handed the power by the players' union. They conceded that the league has full power to determine the contours of the gambling policy unilaterally without collective bargaining. Think about that for a moment. The NFL is saying, hey, here's the policy. We're turning this over to the union that gave us the authority to come up with it. It's on them as much as it is on us to lay this out to you. And the teams, and let me also mention the agents, have also lacked in this area because everything is so vague and detailed. This needs to be very black and white. You don't bet on the NFL. It is legal in your state that you can have the app. Go place a bet if you think that Nurmagomedov last year, 2 years ago, prior to his retirement, is going to win. If you think that Tony Ferguson is going to somehow beat Justin Gaethje.
Or Scotty Scheffler's going to win the weekend tournament in the PGA Tour.
Or if you think Western Kentucky's going to cover the 14.5 against Texas San Antonio. Who cares based on the way this policy reads? The NFL, though, cares about the integrity of what they're doing, which has been preaching against all things Sin City for decades upon decades. And now they are raking in the money, just like radio stations and TV stations across the country did in 2019 and 2020, that kept a lot of local places afloat and people in jobs and media, because the only advertisers during COVID were the sports apps, because those were becoming legal state to state. And the NFL's taking in that money around the same time, if you look at who was advertising and who wasn't. And the NFLPA just gave full authority to the league to say, come up with whatever policy and enforce it however you want. This is on the Players Association that is weak as hell. And I am sympathetic to the players that feel like they didn't know or still don't know the ramifications of betting on again, hypothetically, an NBA game, the UFC, PGA Tour on the weekend, it can be slam ball, whatever they're taking props on now. As long as it's not the NFL, which also, by the way, includes things like the NFL draft, NFL combine. You can't do that either. As long as it's not underneath the Shield's purview, I don't think it should be a part of this policy. But the NFL, with the current umbrella and the policy that's in place, only the players have been granted access to these apps to bet on anything. If you're an employee of the league, if you're a broadcaster or a janitor in the building, you're not allowed to bet on anything, including college sports, including anything other than the NFL, which is expressly prohibited. Chad, it's confusing. And while I think the league is pointing to the NFLPA and saying, hey, you gave us this authority, we're going to punish these guys, and we're going to continue to do so because we need the integrity to stand afloat. We need to point to this because we're serious about it. This is also a group of ownership that want their star players available. It's a group of general managers and head coaches that don't want to find out in week 4 that some guy didn't know the policy and bet on something in the preseason, and now he's out for potentially a month and a half, and he's an integral part of a piece of the puzzle for what you had planned going into the season. That's why they'll come back to the drawing board and they'll figure something out here. But in the meantime, the agents and specifically the PA, they've got to figure out a way to get the message across, because the league had Brady do this PSA for the players. They laid out 6 big points, and then they went bullet by bullet underneath those points that we've laid out. Can it be confusing? Sure. I think if the teams have to lay this out in a much smoother fashion, otherwise there's going to be a lot more of this, because
these suspensions should get the message across.
But we've seen the suspensions already.
I know, but now these are all the guys doing this around the same time. Now that all these suspensions happen, that should get the message across. Well, my point is, it should have never come to this.
But my point is, since the suspensions have taken place, Jamison Williams, if it all took around the same time, what about the last 2 months? That time period of what guys have done. Now that we've had OTAs and minicamps.
I don't know. I don't know that we're going to find anyone's done anything.
But
maybe they all stopped when that news came out.
These companies, though, are turning over different accounts. It's not going to stop, but it's also not to the detriment of the league yet.
Well, who asked for this? This is a new segment on the show. Who asked for this? Like, who, on both sides, why would either side, usually in a negotiation, you could see why one side might want something and why the other side might fight it. I see all of this stuff about placing a bet on a different sport on a team bus, and I think, why would either side want to stipulate that as part of the suspension? Why not just blanket statement, you can never bet on the NFL?
Well, here's why.
And everything else is fair game. Like, why would anyone want that?
They want to just have a blanket rule that you can't do it because you land in a state where it's legal. Not every state with an NFL team can you do this. So they have to put that in to the policy for players that will land in, and if they land in Nashville for a road trip, they're here on a Saturday for a noon kickoff here. The policy's in place because it's legal here and not necessarily legal in wherever, right? So that's the reason why it's in place the way it is.
But again, if
it doesn't have to be that difficult.
Don't bet on the NFL. How many headaches would you solve?
Well, but I think
if that was the stipulation.
But here, I'm with you 100%. They're going to argue, we don't want the perception that guys are blowing their salaries on whatever and becoming a big headline with whatever sports app is out there. Again, simplify this or just do away with it, because the guys that are currently getting suspended, Isaiah Rodgers is a 6th-round pick making like $700,000. This isn't the $50 million per year quarterbacks that are losing out on a year's salary.